Happy birthday, Jan! You handsome son of a gun. Happy birthday, Jan!
That incredibly strange cold opening with some 40-year-old dude in India serenading me on my birthday was my first introduction to the gig economy. Frank, because he loves me so much, hired that guy for $5 on a app called Fiverr, which has become a much bigger app today, but hired that guy to serenade me, to sing to me and call me names. And my mind was blown that some dude in India halfway around the world for $5 would personalize and do a dance and sing for me. This episode is all about gigs. Both Frank and I hire a lot of contractors for the various businesses that we use. Some of them work for companies. Some of them just are doing them as gigs. And Frank and I are also part of the gig economy on the other side in that we both do consulting gigs. We've hired out our hours. We've sold projects. This podcast is a gig. So this episode is really all about how to start a gig, how to use people that are in the gig economy to build and scale companies and not do everything yourself, how to use gigs to grow a larger company, to fill in and not just hire direct employees. Hope you enjoy this. We had a blast making this one, and we hope you enjoy our gig.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God on the air.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie.
Ian, you son of a gun. Changed up this week.
Welcome to our gig. Welcome to our weekly gig.
I changed up our intro this week because of the incredible audio that we have from 2013, which is the first evidence of Ian and I using the gig economy on the internet.
Yeah, Frank and I we're both going in a million different paths during the week. So this is our Wednesday is when we get together for 2 or 3 hours every week. And normally before we record anything, we just chat for an hour and catch up on what the other is up to, what they're doing. And it was pretty interesting this week. Frank's chasing around a bunch of real estate deals. I'm trying to sell a bunch of car alarms for a tech company. But all we were talking about from a labor perspective were contractors. We weren't talking about direct employees. We were talking about social media marketing. We were talking about advertisers. We were talking about content creators. And it got us to just thinking of just how easy it is to rent out services and talent versus maybe 30, 40 years ago. And got us also thinking how easy it is to be the talent that just does side gigs. And then it got us on a whole nother path of talking about all of our side gigs that we've had over the last 5 or 6 years. And it's led into a pretty fun conversation that we were like, why are we recording this? Because this is a pretty fun topic and it's pretty topical given how many people are quitting major jobs right now with the great resignation, the big quit. I think, Frankie, a lot of people, when you bring this up to people in their 40s or 50s, managers and companies, they just say, that's because the government just gave them money. No one's working. And I think you and I know better. People are working. They're just working differently. They're taking gigs. They're working with 7 or 8 different things at a time, making money, making loot. People are still hustling. They're just maybe not all doing 9 to 5s or applying to those kind of jobs.
I'll give you an awesome example, right? So you go to a restaurant now and there's a couple things. Restaurants that used to be open 7 days a week are now open 5. And every restaurant that I go to has a slightly limited menu, if not a completely limited menu compared to before COVID. And if you ask any of the restaurant owners, they say, I can't find cooks. So cooks did collect checks from the government. But what else has happened in Richmond? I live in Richmond, Virginia. Since COVID happened, there's more private chefs than I've ever seen. There are people who will cook for you on demand. They charge a fair wage. I have one in my life. It's fantastic. But the point is, like, it was really hard to find this person 5 years ago. If you look for a private personal chef now, there's hundreds of choices because those people didn't go back to work on someone else's schedule. They're cooking in their kitchen or yours. They're making you a nice meal. They're making as much, if not more money. And they've taken their skill set and realized I can advertise this on the internet and I don't have to work from 6 o'clock until 2 a.m. cooking in a restaurant. I can do it on my schedule.
So there's something you said there that's incredibly important, which has to do with this gig economy and how much everything has changed. If you wanted to do that 20 years ago, you had to do it through word of mouth. Maybe you knew one wealthy person that wanted a cook to make their meals. And then if you did a good job, you'd say, do you know any friends who might like this? But it wasn't terribly easy to go find new leads, find new customers. Now you can go, people are putting up posts on Upwork for this kind of stuff. You can go to Upwork right now and say, I'm a chef in Virginia, and I'm going to search 20 miles around my house for people that are saying they're looking for a private chef. And you can find work like that, snap of a finger. Couldn't do that 30 years ago. So that, right, the fact that she can advertise easily and make money, that's the new component of this. That's the digital component.
30 years ago is forever ago. I mean, 30 years ago, you and I were in high school. So 10 years ago, when you and I started having these conversations, like I learned about this stuff in I think I'm going to talk about it here. So Tim Ferriss came out with the book, The 4-Hour Work Week. And I didn't look it up. It's somewhere in the last half of the 2000s, 2005 to 2010, somewhere in there. I read it for the first time in 2009. And what he talked about were all these virtual assistants, the term VAs, right? So most of us know this now. Like if you go read the 4-Hour Work Week now, it's boring because it's become popular and it's just in society. But in 2012, 2013 is when I started to use them. And Upwork wasn't even called Upwork then. It had a different name. I don't even remember it, but it was a different name. And then Fiverr was big and there was all these other little things, but things like Uber Eats didn't exist. DoorDash didn't exist. Thumbtack didn't exist. These are all things that came about in the last decade since this started. But what it is there's a leverage point. And if I think about this, I have 3 people who I work with every single week in my personal life: cook, personal trainer, cleaning person, all of which I found on sites like Thumbtack, which is a gig economy site. And those things didn't exist. And now they're so easy. These are people that are integral parts of my life and my weekly routine. And literally, how do you find those in the old days? You go to the gym and you rip off a little tag from something hang up on a cork board. Nowadays, it can follow you around on your phone.
Yeah, Thumbtack, I just used that to go put, I needed an electrical outlet put in on a wall. We're hanging a TV in our gym and just went and found it because Jenny was like, do you know anyone? And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. Let's just go online and find something really quick.
Yeah.
So for me, right around that time, I remember you gave me that book. You bought me that book and I got 30 pages into it. And I was like, this is horseshit. I was busy. I was an executive, with a big publicly traded company. I was making lots of money. I just thought it was all garbage. And maybe it was the title that just kind of turned me off. Because at the time I was working a lot of hours and I was like, it felt like a snake oil title where someone was just trying to sell books to convince people you don't have to work hard in life. And when you really read the book, it's not really that. It's how to get a lot more done with the same number of hours and how to leverage yourself and make more money.
The crux of the book, if you haven't read it, it's worth reading even all these years later. It's a leverage point. And what this whole entire episode is how do you leverage your time? So I would argue that I would say the vast majority of Americans participate both ways in the gig economy. I think smart people in 2022 participate both ways. You clearly use it to make your life easier. I was at home with my parents 6 months ago. We realized we were out of olive oil. In the old days, we would have gotten in the car, drove to the store. I literally went on this thing called Go Puff, which my barber told me about. It's for people who smoke weed and they want to go smoke. Like they'll deliver you stuff from a convenience store in 15 minutes or 30 minutes or less. It's usually like 15 minutes. So I go to Go Puff.
Well,
I
like,
ordered a
want some chips? Like, there's no munchies in the house. They want some.
Oh, there's
chips?
tons of munchies too. But like for this particular instance, what I needed was olive oil. But in the old days, I would have left and missed 30 to 45 minutes with my parents. So I would have got in the car, drove to the store, got the olive oil, drove home. So for $6 fee, I paid for the damn olive oil and I missed nothing. I was in the house with my parents hanging out. And my dad said to me, he goes, life is just too easy, because he's an older guy. He doesn't understand this, but that's how you use the gig economy. But what Ian and I are going to talk about is the other way. That's how we make it easier for us. But what we also do is we take our skill sets and we put them out there and we allow people to hire us. I get a 1099 every year. Ian gets a 1099, he gets a K1. Like these are things that you get when you're not an employee. You get them if you are a subcontractor.
So I think, yeah, and I think this is going to be a fun episode because we're going to be able to talk about this as business owners who hire lots of people who work in the gig economy. You and I hire a lot of contractors to do various things for our businesses, but we also have our own hustles. We have our own little side gigs where we either use our resources or our knowledge or our hours, and we charge people for our time. So we know what it's like to run a gig, and we also know what it's like to hire people that are looking for gigs. And we use a lot of the same, methods that other people use. It's interesting. We had to go back and look this up. The first time I learned about the gig economy, Frank, always looking to school me. So Frank was in the private world way before me. So he left NVR almost a decade before I left. So I was still grinding away, corporate job, showing up every day in my Brooks Brothers shirt. And Frank was wearing hoodies and working from remote and doing gig stuff. But it was my birthday and it was 2013. And I just get this random email. And Frank was nervous I was going to delete it, and I would have. He's like, you got to open that. You got to open that. And so I go in, I click this link, and it's this like kind of garbled, low definition video of a chubby Indian guy with no shirt on and like I don't know what you call those things. It looks like a dress, a sarong, or
it kind of looks like a hula skirt, but it wasn't. And
he's just dancing in front of, and there's like bad Indian music playing in the background. I don't know what I'm looking at. And I'm like, Frank's punking me. Like I'm going to turn this off.
I got to set this up a little bit. Like I looked for something that was ridiculous and embarrassing and was barely audible. And I found this guy who literally did these crazy things. He has like an unattractive dad bod. And it's like everything about it screams cheap. Like that was it.
Yeah. So you nailed it. And so I almost turned it off because I didn't get it. I was like, there's this chubby guy dancing, but Frank was like, you have to watch till the end. And then at the very end, this is where my mind was kind of blown. So I'm watching, I'm like, anyone can forward a dumbass video of a fat guy dancing. I've seen that before. But at the end, he stops dancing. He looks at the camera and he goes, hey, Eon. And he goes, you handsome son of a gun. Happy birthday, Eon. It is absolutely hilarious. So he says like Frank's catch line to me, and he can't pronounce my name, but he's clearly talking to me from India. And Frank, which site did you use for that?
So I use Fiverr for it, which is, people barely even use it anymore. Nowadays, there's things that are more expensive than Fiverr. And the other thing is there was two back and forth. He wouldn't say bitch, and he emailed that to me. And so we had to change it from son of a bitch to son of a gun. And he got your name completely wrong the first time. I had to spell it phonetically. So I got two drafts for my $5.
Got to have a code. Frank did get one edit so he could go back and say, redo this because you didn't say his name right. But Fiverr started as a company. The name Fiverr, they're very different today, but the name Fiverr started because it was like a dollar store for gigs. So
whatever you want, we'll do it for $5. That's how Fiverr started. Whatever you want, we'll do it for $5.
Put your contracts out there and you kind of scroll through and find things, or you could search for it. You could find whatever. So Frank found out about this from a mastermind group that he was a part of. People told him, and of course, Frank used gallows humor to use it for the first time instead of actual business related. but there's a lot of businesses like today Fiverr, you can go hire a lawyer on Fiverr. You can go hire anyone creative. You can hire just about anything you could think of for a business. You can pay tens of thousands of dollars for someone today on Fiverr. Their big competitor is Upwork. Upwork is my favorite. I use Upwork all the time to go fill a niche, fill some kind of labor that I need that either I don't have the skill set or I don't have the time to go do something that one of my businesses needs.
So there's two things I want to say here, Ian. First is this. When I left corporate America and moved into the world of being an entrepreneur, I joined a mastermind group and I knew all the corporate stuff. I knew how to hire people. I knew how to do all that stuff. I knew how to like overspend, but I didn't know how to do things inexpensively because I worked in a corporate world where you pay for the Brooks Brothers suits and you pay for the high dollar stuff. So I found Fiverr through people who didn't have the means that NVR had. So they had to start lower. And we mentioned Upwork. Upwork started off as a company called Odesk, and they changed it to Upwork because it's more relevant now. But Odesk was also in existence back when Fiverr was. But both of these companies have gone through a rebranding. Fiverr still has the same name, but now you can spend thousands of dollars per hour or per gig because they've expanded. Because the market, at first, it was goofy shit like this. It's kind of like how the internet started. Like the internet wasn't full of all this incredible stuff when it first started. It was very niche. And then as more people start to use it and the market starts to expand, what happens is smart business people start looking and say, I can expand services because there's a need and want and desire here. Companies like Upwork, Fiverr, they're in the mainstream. Like these companies now have real advertisements, like, during NFL football games. Like these are real services that they're multi-billion dollar businesses at this point.
So the gig economy, as defined by Wall Street Journal, it's a labor market characterized by the prevalence of short-term contracts or freelance work as opposed to permanent jobs, typically enabled by the digital economy. In essence, all that's saying is it's easier and easier to fill needs and to find work, to add value to people for a sum of money. It's easier to get the leads and to find it. And pretty interesting stats, Frankie. 64% of millennials say that they've had a side hustle or have had one in the past 12 months, compared to 50% of Gen Xers and 34% of baby boomers, which I think that baby boomer number is actually pretty high. It's pretty good. And 19% of millennials said that they had more than one side gig. And then the dollar amounts, millennials surveyed said that they made an average of $11,000 per year from their side hustle. And that's 20% more than Gen Xers and 50% more than baby boomers. So Gen Xers made $8,800 and baby boomers made $6,000. So, those dollar amounts are pretty interesting because these are technically side gigs, meaning these are not their main source of income. And I remember hearing some of these stats 5 or 6 years ago when I was at NVR, and I didn't believe it. Someone told me like half of millennials have a side gig. And I remember being like, that's bullshit. There's no way they have time to be working side gigs. In my mind, a side gig, even back then, Frankie, was you worked at Starbucks on the weekend. Like my mind still wasn't, even though the gig economy was and was raging 5 years ago, in my mind, I just thought you work restaurants at night or you work on a weekend for somebody. It was still very, I guess my thinking of it was very primitive.
So I want to say a few things here. So like if you go back to the silent generation, which is the generation that was basically born into the Great Depression. Back then, the gig economy was load up everything you own into a wagon and go to California and hope there's work there. That's a Great Depression era. That is Tom Joad. That is The Grapes of Wrath.
Pick some apples and don't bruise them because you won't get paid for them.
that's a gig economy 100 years ago. But back then you had to pack everything you knew into a wagon, you had to drag it across the country, and you had to go hope that it was there. The internet bridges that gap, and most of what we can do with technology, you don't have to go pick apples anymore. But that's what the gig economy is. Like if you look at like the border between Mexico and the United States, it used to be open, and migrants would come up, pick things during the summer, go home during the winter, and they would come back every year. Part of a gig economy. That's how things work. But the other side of it is this, and I realize this as an employer. So you and I have come to this realization differently, but we both arrived at a similar place. We used to start people in the mid to high 40s. I start no one that low anymore, because if you don't make roughly 60 to 65 grand annually, you have a part-time job. And I know this because I had a bunch of people 8-10 years ago who were making 45 to 50 grand, and they were bartending and they were doing other things. And they come in Monday and they were exhausted, or I was rested. And what I started to realize is these people need to make this money. So they can do it one of two ways. They can burn the midnight oil, and they can be horse shit on Monday and Tuesday because they're exhausted. And like if you're a waitress or a bartender, you usually work Sunday and you work Thursday. So like Monday and Friday are compromised. So what I started to realize as an employer is I need to pay a little bit more so people don't need a second job. And I'll tell them, I'm going to pay a premium for this role, but my expectation is this will be your only job, and I'll get those hours and I'll get that productivity. But that's something that's real, and you have to be very mindful of it. It's easy for people to pick up a side gig. So if you want to get the most out of them, you got to talk about that with them, especially the younger crowd, and say, this is a conscious choice. The salary range for this is 35 to 45 grand. I'm paying more, but I'm doing it intentionally because I want the best of you. I want 5 really good days, not 3.5.
So, Frankie, my first gig, I was working for a friend's landscaping company, and I considered that my summer job. I considered that my real job, because I would go, get up early, 6 a.m, and we'd cut grass all day. But I considered my gig, I used to umpire. And the reason why I considered that a gig is my boss didn't care whether I worked 1 game or 15 games, didn't care if I worked none, because there were enough umpires to go around. We all just kind of snatched them off the schedule. I got paid like $25 a game, maybe $20 a game. So I could go work a tournament on a weekend and do 6 games and make a ton of money and be tired, or I could just skip the tournament altogether. But to me, growing up, so that's growing up that's in the 90s when I was in high school. That was a gig. That was for me, that was a gig. And I didn't have to go, I still had to go through an organization to get the leads. I didn't go out. I wasn't cold calling little leagues and saying, I'll take a game, I'll do this. I wasn't calling travel coaches and saying, you need an ump. Like, it was all there for me to go pick. So I still need an organization, but I considered that probably my first gig.
Yeah. And I was an umpire too. I'll spend a couple of seconds on it. I'll move to the gig I'll talk about. But like, the reason that you become an umpire when you're a kid is you're little and you see kids who are slightly older than you umping. And you start talking to them like, hey, how do you do this? Well, I walk over there to that building and I apply. It's pretty easy. And and if you're a good kid, you show up, you do things, it's not hard to stand out in the umpire world because it's a bunch of gig people. So if hey, I'm missing a shift, and you pick something up, very quickly you find yourself getting opportunities that kind of come to you. Speaking of opportunities that come to you, like as a younger kid, like 6th grade, I started babysitting neighbors' kids. I was just slightly older than them, and I was like across the street. So my mom's like, if something goes wrong, just call us. I'll walk across the street. But like, that was one of my first gigs, babysitting. And for those same people, I mowed their lawns. And this was just, hey, Frank has a lawnmower. He'll mow your lawn for you. I grew up in Florida, so it wasn't a lot of leaf blowing. There wasn't a lot of snow shoveling. But there was absolutely lawn mowing, like 9 months of the year, 10 months of the year. So I did those things. And it was shitty work. Like what Ian and I both talk about with this is like, he picked weeds, I lawn mowed, hated it. Like I remember thinking like, I never want to do this again. Like there are people who think lawn mowing is cathartic. I think it's torture. I go back to being 12 and be pushing this lawnmower to heat.
Well, the reason why it's easy to find jobs like weeding and shoveling snow is it sucks. Like people are even in, my broke ass town of Michigan, people were willing to give me $10, $15 to not have to go, grab a shovel and go to work on 12 inches of snow that fell over the night. They were happy to pay, just like you paid to go get that olive oil. They were happy to give me some cash and say, I'm not going out there and freezing my ass off. You can do it. So it's like, yeah, I could, whenever it snowed, I could go make $200 if I wanted. My back was sore for 4 days. Like, it was brutal. It wasn't scalable work.
There's a side of this. There's a side of this now that's different though. So kids, I think, are being forced not to do the menial labor or menial tasks that we did, because in all honesty, I can find a professional crew who will mow my lawn or pick weeds for a similar price to a high school kid, but they're going to do it better and they're going to do it faster and they're going to be a hell of a lot more reliable. So what I think has happened is there's a shift. These professionals who are hard to find in the old days, you go to the yellow pages, but if someone was running an ad in the yellow pages, are really expensive. So you would use Ian to pull your weeds. But now I can go to Thumbtack and find somebody and I build a relationship with them and they pull my weeds 4 times a year and I have to think about it. But what happens for a kid who wants to hustle and make some money, they go to the internet. They don't want to pull weeds. 1 and 2, there's so many other things they can do. They could be creative. They could use their skill set. And that's how this thing kind of morphs.
And I think, so, when you talk about creative, I think when you say gig economy to the average person, they're going to say like, oh yeah, I get it. Uber, DoorDash, I use those. And yes, those are gigs. And that's fine if you need to make some loot. So, if you're working at DoorDash while you're going to high school or college and you need to make some extra loot, I kind of look at that as like umpire job, right? I can go work 2-3 hours a night. But if you're thinking of that, like, oh, wow, I could make a career of that. I'll work when I want. It's flexible. No, you can't. You can't make a career out of that. You're going to starve.
So Uber's got this great thing now where they put on the app, like, do you want to talk or not? That's new. And most Uber drivers, I don't really feel like talking to, I'll tell you the God's honest truth. But before that was a reality, my wife and I flew to Miami. We got off the plane, we get into an Uber at the airport, and we start driving. And this woman, she's not American, but kind of irrelevant to the thing. But I think it's relevant because maybe she has a loyalty or feels something pulling her to Uber. And she starts bitching to us about how Uber isn't loyal to her and how she's a loyal person and I'm a loyal person. I'm going to work for Uber. And I didn't say anything. I just kind of nodded and like, just get me to the damn hotel and let's end this conversation. But it stuck with me for years for this reason. She's loyal to a company that's set up for you not to be loyal. Like, you have the wrong alignments. I think the gig economy is great if you have the right alignments. Like, Ian and I have gigs. We do all kinds of gigs. Like, I have actually physically paid Ian a significant amount of money in the last couple of years to help me with something because Ian's better at it than me. But I've leveraged my skill sets in ways where other people pay me. So these are things, well, I have a full-time job, I have a staff. I look at it, it's like, where do I have a specialized skill that I can charge a premium for, and I can make way more per hour than if I'm sitting at my desk. And that is how you can leverage a gig economy.
I think that's really well said. So I think we should talk a little bit about some of the gigs that we've done just over the past few years. So when I left NVR, I didn't really know what the hell I wanted to do. I was just kind of chilling for a while. I've talked a lot about on this podcast that I wanted to go out and buy a property. I didn't know how to buy a property. So I had to rely on a lot of people, but that was my first gig. I didn't consider it a business. I considered it an investment, but it's a lot different than just buying a stock. Going and acquiring commercial real estate is a responsibility, one in which I would have to work if I bought it. And so I had to go out, I had to find deals, I had to cold call, I had to find a deal that was good. So I had to look at hundreds of them really to figure it out. I had to find a team to go do it, to go acquire it. That's probably my first gig, and that's the first way I got paid. And it took a lot of risk for me, and it took a lot of learning of new things. It wasn't as simple as I left MBR and I went and I bought a real estate investment stock. I didn't go buy a REIT and just sit on it and do nothing. It required my work and my labor to go get paid. That I would consider that probably the first gig that I did. What was your first gig after leaving NBR.
So before we get to me, I want to pivot this a little bit. I consider your first gig Quora. Like when I look at you, I think of what you like. You and I talked before you quit, and when you're a senior level executive, you come to the realization that I have people that like me and follow me. And one of the things that I learned when I left NVR is they tell you they do, but they have a full-time job and they're loyal to their paycheck a lot more than they're loyal to you. So what Ian did is, I think, which was really smart, is you started to figure out like, hey, I really do, besides owning a real estate investment, which is a gig, but it kind of gives you an annuity and a payment. Like the way you researched and how you put time into Quora to build an audience and how you leverage that was the thing that I thought was the biggest leap and kind of into a different foray. And the way that I watched it is you did this. You first you went out and researched, where should I write? What topics are popular? You kind of said, this is what I'm good at and have a skill set for. And then you started to build an audience. And then as you built that audience, like to me, that became a source of multiple gigs for you, but you kind of researched it thinking, I'm going to capitalize on this gig economy.
Yeah, so Quora is it's a website, it's an app, it's a social media app where people ask questions and experts answer. And the best answers get more circulation, get more views, you can build followers. So I think I was a little bored. I think I wanted to write. I enjoy writing. I want to get better at it. So it was almost a hobby. And I started by creating a website and I was going to blog, but I had no idea how to even get it to people. And Quora was a safer place to just go. I didn't have to bother my friends. I just could go write. And the first 20 or 30, no one read. And I got smarter and smarter about what things were getting read and how to get more circulation. And to the point where within a year in Quora, I had, 15 million views of my posts. I ended my first year as the number one most read business writer. And I remember that because I took that screenshot and then I went and used that to go get a job with Forbes. I went and cold called Forbes, found the guy who was the editor-in-chief of careers, sent him a cold email, literally, and plopped that in there that I'm the number one most read writer on. And like, he wouldn't have cared if I said, hey, I had this great career for corporations. That would be one and everything. What he cared about is I knew how to start from scratch and get a lot of people to read my stuff, because that's what he cares about is, will people read your stuff? So that's probably true that Quora is the first thing I took Quora, then I went to Medium, made money on Medium, then Forbes paid me. And then from there, when I built that, now I have a blog and that blog leads into my online. So all of that gig, led to consulting. It led to other things that I got paid on. But that's probably the first hustle that I went out and started from scratch and figured out how to go make money online.
The way that I look at it, you're a good investor. You're like, I've talked to you about stocks and picks and things like that. And you did commercial because you wanted to replace your income. You had money to invest and you needed something that was basically a paycheck. And it took hustle. But to me, the building of the gig and leveraging the gig, one of the things I told Ian when he left is, you think you leave with an audience, but you got to build your own. And Ian built his own audience and he built it very quickly and very successfully. And it's turned into multiple things. When he does consulting now, he's got people from all over the world that found them on Quora. Like, we all joke, his wife and I will joke, well, Ian just took a conference call with a button-down shirt and a pair of Lululemon shorts, and he was on the phone with India because the folks from India found him on Quora and they ultimately hired him to do some consulting. So that's how the gig economy, I think, can go full circle. For me, the gig economy started really small after NVR. I left in 2009, and the first thing I did was clear short sales. So I was an investor, but I was really a subcontractor. I was being paid to figure out how to negotiate with the bank to, if your house was worth 200 grand and you owed 3, how to get the bank to come down to that 200 number. That was my real skill.
Now, what would you split the difference of the savings with them? How would you get paid for that?
No, it's illegal for them to get the proceeds. But what I would do is I would convince the bank that was really worth 180 and not 200. And I would get the short sale down to 180, and then I would sell it to somebody else for 200 or 205. And I would collect a fee in the middle. But you were bringing me in to help you negotiate the short sale. And then what I did is I leveraged it into a second piece. But that business and then buying things off the MLS led me to my most successful gig. which is where I became a consultant for a mastermind group. I was a member of that mastermind group for years. And then the owner of it was watch me grow and look how I did with business. And now they pay me, significant amount of money to go to something that I used to pay to be a part of.
Yeah. So you started by paying $25,000 a year to just have the right to go there and listen to other smart real estate investors quarterly. And then it became, you no longer had to pay. Then it became, if you help be one of the leaders there and do coaching for the people, because you had grown past most of the members, you would get a fee of six figures, a nice solid income to, now it took more of your time. You had to prepare, you have weekly calls, you have to be a part of engaged with the executive team, but it's 100% a gig. And you get a lot out of it, but you're also getting paid now for your time for something you used to pay to just be a part of, which I think is brilliant.
And it edified me. I was just some dipshit from Virginia before, right? Now I'm on a stage with one of the best in the breed of this particular type of group. I have credibility. So what do? I do one-on-one consulting with people. I have a coaching program. I mean, I've got clients that pay me over $50,000 a year, some more than that, to have me help them coach. And I don't get there if I don't join the group first, have the opportunity to get on the stage, and then be able to do it under someone else's umbrella. And that's what Ian and I are driving at. Like, the cool thing about these umbrellas, the Upworks, the other places, is you don't just have to hope to God, like you put a bandit sign up and somebody calls you. Like, if you're qualified and you go to Thumbtack, you're going to get phone calls because Thumbtack does all the work. And then you just post a good, compelling ad there and you get jobs. So this is how you can utilize this to your benefit. There's a piece of this, Ian, that I want to make sure I say. I think if you don't utilize the gig economy to your advantage the way you and I do, you're closing yourself off to education. I often get paid to work with clients who I, on balance, have a better business than, or I'm better at something than they are. But invariably, even somebody who's behind you in the cycle, they do something better than you. So when you're working with other people, what you do is, if you're humble enough to listen, you find holy crap, they've uncovered something that they're better at than me. How they write this, it's little tweaks, it's like little levers, big doors that start to open if you do these things where you're with other clients.
And I think, you can do it online, but I also think a lot of the money that we make, we leverage our relationships. We know people who have needs that you listen to them complain, you listen to them tell you what they're stressed out about, you think about where you could help. So, from a compensation perspective, I was working a gig and didn't know it within weeks of leaving NVR. So I had invested in CodeGuard 7 years before. It's a tech startup. And as soon as I told my friend David, who is the founder, that I had invested in this company, hey, I just left NVR, I'm chilling. I had nothing else involved other than just I told him that. And he was like, hey, we're kind of in a really weird place, and that we could either flatline or we could really pump this thing up. I need some help. And I didn't really know how, one, there's selfish reasons for helping. I have an investment. I put my own cash into this company. I don't want it to flatline and go to nothing. But I also know him and trust him well enough that I knew that if I could help him do a good job, he was going to take care of me. And we had that discussion. So I worked my ass off. I went to Germany. I went down to Florida with him. I went to a bunch of different places. Every day I was on the phone with him for an hour or two. And I didn't charge by the hour on purpose, because I think that cheapens it a little bit. I really wanted to price for value. Let's get a big exit on this. And, helped him negotiate along the way. We talked a lot. And when it closed, he negotiated with the board a payment of $100,000 to me, in addition to the money that I made on us getting 25X or whatever we got on our initial investment. But he gave, cut me a check. So that was my first big consulting fee that I made. And that was for, I don't know, a couple hours a day for, 4 or 5 months, and that was leveraging a relationship I already had, Frankie.
I want to say this. If you're successful in business and you're generally talented and good at what you do, it's very different than someone who's driving for Uber or delivering for DoorDash. Like if you're doing those things, you're looking to make ends meet. But if you're an executive or you're someone who has a fairly rich history and career, you're going to actually have more opportunities than you probably want to pursue. And what you have to be very mindful of is the asymmetric risk reward. How much time versus what it's going to be. So what Ian and I are talking about is a luxurious spot that most people don't get to. We know that. But if you are someone who quits a high level job, someone's invariably going to call and say, can you help me? And you just have to make sure it's the amount of time you want to spend. It has the reward you want. And you have to be mindful. The gig economy will take your time. Am I being paid for my time? Does it have upside? In Ian's example with CodeGuard, with my example with the Collective Genius, it does. For both of us, these are things that it's a decision of should I do this or not? Because it's going to take time away from other things, but what's the upside?
So how do we hire out from the gig economy? Frankie, how many subcontractors do you cut checks to in a given month with all of your businesses?
So this is awesome, right? So I have 50 employees, and on average, everyone has a household of roughly 3. And we have 400 subcontractors who we utilize. And most of those people have an average family of roughly 3, right? So if you do the math, there's more than 1,200 people that we support in our company. But if you get it just down to a bare tax, it's roughly 400 registered 1099s that are subcontractors, that people who we give gigs to, and they do a certain service for us.
And so, the 50 you feel a little more responsible for. The subcontractors on gigs is very simple. Do a good job, I'll pay you. Do a good job the next time. There is no, if you cease to do a good job for Frank Cava and it impacts his employees or his customers, Frank finds someone else to fill that gig the next time.
So this is what's cool about the gig economy. The gig economy is that is true to a point, Ian, but there's, of those 400 subs, there's about 50 of them that are like family. Like they
They're
had
almost like Cava employees. They get so much business from you.
90+% of their business is us. We've taken them from 1 employee in 1 van to 15 employees and 5 vans. So as an employer, it feels great because I know we've helped get there, but I have a responsibility with them too. So, but I'm not Uber. I'm not enormous. I'm small enough where I know my electrician by name. He knows my children's name. He knows the passcode to get into my house. Like I have relationships with these people. So it's a little bit more than a gig, but the upside is I don't know. My dad is an electrician. And then even with that knowledge, I don't know enough to run an electrical company. So I hire someone who's better at it than me to do that work.
So what are these folks doing? All these 400 subs, what are these folks doing? What kind of stuff are you services?
Across the board. So we do construction and we do real estate, right? So like at the construction level, I got framers, plumbers, electricians, trim carpenters, cabinet contractors, all of those. I've got people who do photographs of the house. I've got stagers. I have closers. I have permit runners. I have people who negotiate with the city to help me work with zoning. On the other end of the spectrum, I'm a licensed realtor, but I make a conscious choice. I outsource all the sales of my properties to realtors who are full-time realtors. So there's not enough hours in a day to do everything incredibly well. So I pick the best in breed realtors in the market and I have them list our stuff for us because yes, I'm losing several percent, but I've got a better person at doing that job. So in some instances,
you're turning your capital faster because they're better at it. So you get your money back faster.
That's it. So the subcontractor relationship, I think, can be a couple of things. It could be something that you don't want to do or you're not good at, or if you hire someone who's even better at it than you. I have a cell phone and I have a camera. I hire a photographer to take pictures of every one of our houses because he's better at it than me. So this is the way you can use the gig economy and you hire out into it.
So, when we talked about this, and I was trying to separate myself from businesses I'm an owner in to gigs, I could technically say that every single thing I do that makes money is a gig. 5on4 Group, which is my main holding company, which is leadership, consulting, management training. It's a gig. I can choose to do work. I can choose to not do work. So I built really all of 5-on-4 with contractors. So it started with multiple management programs, but I built the website, my logo, the LLC, all the legal, the course material. It took me about a year to build Leadership Essentials. It was a 12-week management course, but I knew PowerPoint. So I knew how to build, I knew how to research, get the stats, get the data, build the lessons, input all of my stories from being a manager and how to teach people how to manage, use a lot of material I had built over the last 20 years. But I didn't know how to make videos. I didn't know how to house the videos on a website. I didn't know how to automate it and set it up so that if you bought from me, I didn't know how to set up an e-commerce site, how to take people's credit cards. I didn't know I had to hire out the social media advertising, how to build a marketing funnel when someone gives me their email address. I didn't know any of that. I built all of that with contractors. And Frankie, what I love about the gig economy now is if you'd have come to me, and this happened, if you'd have come to me in 2018 and said, hey, I want you to train all of my managers. I have 12 new ones. I need them all to be great managers. I need you to put a training program together. I need you to do all the teaching. I'd have priced it at like $500,000 because you would have told me all that. And I would have been like, shit, that's going to be like 4 months to build it. I'm going to have to fly out there all the time, spend all this time with your managers. Now, if you ask me to do that same thing and you want my involvement, it's $5,000 per manager. It's so much cheaper because I have an entire video program that I spent a year building, put a lot of my time in, but I needed contractors to do that. And so now I can do it for much cheaper. You've got Zoom, you've got Teams, you've got different things where I can be with you, almost feel like I'm live with you, but it's so much cheaper. And it's because I can do this gig because I used other people in the gig economy to build the entire company up.
So from the example I talked about from the Grapes of Wrath, the gig economy has been around forever. I mean, go back further, hundreds of years, there's always been a gig economy. What's changed is the world's appetite for it, and technology makes it so you can do things that you used to have to get on an airplane to do. So you can drive an Uber. So Ian, if you had to guess, what's the median amount of money an Uber driver makes working 40 hours a week, like over the course of a year, median?
Median, and this is someone who's all in, who's working
all in. 40 full-time job is driving an Uber.
40 grand, 50 grand.
The median is 36,000. The very high end is over 60. Like somewhere between 60 and 80 grand, depending on where you live and how many hours you put in. That boils down to the median is $17.40 an hour. And that's before you pay for gas and wear and tear on your car and the other stuff. So it works out to be like
dumbass kid barfing in your car after you picked him up from the bars.
Exactly. It's like $9, $10 an hour. So like there's a bunch of people who drive Ubers. Like it's incredibly rare. You need to be in the middle of nowhere, or you need to be at an obscure hour not to be able to find an Uber. So there's a shitload of people willing to work for $9 an hour net. That's not good money. So think about your time and how do you leverage it? Ian and I've said this multiple times in this episode. Like, how do you use your time in the gig economy and leverage something and get paid a premium, not do things at a discount?
So if you want to work in the gig economy, Frank and I have a few rules that you should think about. So I think one thing you have to remember is that the same rules apply to wealth, whether you work for a company, start a company, or you want to be a freelancer. The same rules apply. You can only get so far in life renting out your hours. And I would say if you're starting with no money and your goal is to become rich renting out your hours, you will never get there. You just will never feel wealthy. If that's your goal, you still have to figure out how to build equity, how to leverage yourself, how to leverage your experience. You always have to be asking, how do I have equity in something, or how do I gain equity? If you want to build true wealth, you won't get there renting your hours, whether you are delivering groceries or Uber driving someone around or contracting your time as a contract accountant on Upwork or a contract lawyer, if you don't have equity in something and you can't leverage yourself, you just won't become wealthy.
That's it. And what I think you need to be very mindful of is, are you filling all of your time? One of the things Nina and I talked about early, well, like when I quit my job, I didn't realize this until I quit my job. But when I quit my job, I realized all my best hours are spent in this company and working for NVR. Like, you know, a normal day starts around 8 in the morning, 7:30, 8 in the morning. Normal day ends somewhere between 5 and 7 p.m. So, you know, some days are earlier than others, but by and large, you're working from 7:30, 8 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, and you're tired. It's not like you're a weak human. You've put all of your day, 10, 12 hours of your day and your thoughts and everything you think about into something else. So it's really hard to build something on the side while that's going on if you're all in the business. So if your goal is to build something, figure out, this is what I did, because I was in a different spot than Ian. I figured out what's the least amount I could make or I can build, and then I could live and build. So what specifically the gig economy, if you can work 40 hours a week in the gig economy, okay. But if you can do 20, 25 hours picking the right gigs, and you had 15 prime hours of your week back, what could you do with that? Could you build ultimately what you want? Or are you basically just taking a job?
Well said. So, Frank, in the finance world, the knowledge difference of a typical loan officer versus a typical loan processor or even an underwriter is very little. I mean, they pretty much both understand the same things: how to qualify for a mortgage, how to get it approved, how to get it closed, how interest rates, payments work. But a loan officer typically makes 3 to 5x what a loan processor makes. What is the one skill the loan officer has that the processor doesn't?
What I was going to say, it's either sales or it's self-confidence, or both.
I think it's a little bit of both. So the loan officer is willing to work on variable pay. They're willing to get paid only, they eat what they kill. They're confident enough in themselves that they can go out and find their own customers, and they're good at selling. They're good at going into the business. The processor is willing to work for 20 to 30% of what the loan officer makes, because they're not confident enough in their selling ability to go out and find new business. And I would say the same applies in the gig economy. It's one thing to say, I'm going to go cut some grass. I'm going to go knock on some doors and I'm going to cut grass. But the person who makes money doing it is the one who hires other people to cut grass and goes out and finds the jobs. Because there's always people willing to cut grass so long as it's consistent money and they don't have to worry about finding the new yards to cut. They just have to tell me where to show up, give me the schedule. That's 80% of the world, people that are willing to just show up and take orders. The people that make money are the ones that go figure it out. They go figure out how to get new leads. They go figure out how to build a payroll, how to hire, how to bring employees on. If you want to make money, start with a gig, learn it, then quickly hire people to go do the lower level stuff. And you go spend your time on building the business out, building a team, finding new customers, building out an infrastructure.
There's a chapter in Freakonomics that's called "Why Do Drug Dealers Live with Their Mothers?" And the reason is because the drug dealers don't make shit because they're the ones physically out there peddling. The people who make money are the ones that manage 20 to 50 drug dealers, collect it all in a really nice car and drive from neighborhood to neighborhood getting it. So like even in the world of, which I know very little about the world of drugs, except from books, but even in something I do know incredibly well, Italian gangster movies, there's always an arc. You go from the guy who's a bully to someone who's an earner, and an earner has a team under him.
Yeah, you want to be a captain. If you want to be a made man is someone who knows how to earn and go out and find new ways to earn to make money for the family. 100%. That's hard.
That's harder knowledge right there, folks. I went and saw Goodfellas instead of going to the homecoming dance in 1990. I couldn't find a date, so like a bunch of us went and saw that movie, but we're going to call that hard earned.
At least you were honest that it wasn't by choice that you didn't go to that dance.
That's right.
So this one's really important, and I've got an example of this that I'm dealing with right now. So start small, but work your way up the value chain. This is incredibly important. Understanding your customers, what are they really trying to get? So I think a lot of people, when they think gig, they want to just fill little tasks, but behind those tasks are something much bigger. So right now at Keep, I'm the chief revenue officer, so I'm responsible for marketing and sales, and I'm pushing pre-orders right now. And to do that, you have to build a little bit of social relevance on social media platforms. So I'm trying to grow followers. I'm trying to get attention, more views, more branding, more attention to our brand. And there's only so much of my time in a day and so many ideas that I can come up with to make videos on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok. I'm on all these platforms, and I'm just running out of hours. And I told David that. I said, I'm going to go find some people that can make content for me. So I went to Upwork. I put out a post. In a lot of, the old way of doing things, I'm going to hire a marketing manager, and he's going to be an employee, and he does social media for us. But if I go hire a gal for that and she turns out to not be real good at it, I've wasted 4 months, and a startup doesn't have that time. The way I'm doing it, I went to Upwork, I put a post out. I said, I need people to make videos. That's it. I'm going to pay $100 a video. And if your videos suck, I'm going to just quit paying you and we're not going to work anymore. We'll clear up. But if they're good, I'll find ways to pay you more. So I hired 3 kids, and they're doing a great job. They're building videos for me on TikTok, and one is clearly starting to stand out. And so I'm talking to him. He's clearly putting more time into his videos. A couple of them have gone viral. We're approaching 1 million views on a couple, and before we were getting like 10,000 views on our stuff. So I called him up and I said, look, he's young. So cool story on the gig economy. He was at KPMG. He's probably 24. He was there for 2 years, and COVID happened. His parents live in Hawaii. So he had to go live in Hawaii for a while because no one was in the office. He was working remote, and he was like, all day long, I'm like, I'm on Zoom calls all day. I wanted to surf, and still find ways to make money. And I had people asking me if I could do little things for them because I was good on social media. That's his story. So I'm like, look, you're always going to be surfing and living with your parents if all you can think about is making videos for $100 a pop. We're paying you we're paying you, give me 7 a week, paying you 700 a week. That's great. You got a few other clients. What you need to be asking is not, what is it worth to Keep for you to make social media videos? That's $100. I can find lots of people that can do it. You should be asking me, what's it worth it if I could triple your followers on Instagram? What's it worth it if I could get you to 1 million TikTok followers? That is worth a hell of a lot more than $100. That's worth $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. And he's a smart kid. So he's like, I get it. I get what you're saying. Now he's come back to me. He's proposed 25 accounts to go run an influencer campaign. I'm going to reach out to them. I'm going to find out their ad schedule. I'm going to help you build the ads. We're going to use influencers to help grow it. I said, now that is how you start making multiples of what you're making. And so, Frankie, when I say work your way up the value chain, Ian doesn't really just want someone to make videos. I want you to get me to an outcome and think about it like I do, which is I want 1 million followers on all those platforms so that when our product is ready and people go there, they're like, holy shit, this is a big company. And they have a ton of pre-orders, obviously, because they have a big following.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show everybody how Ian went from a drug dealer living in his mom's house to driving a pimped out, all black, Escalade. And he did it fast. First of all, he had a great job, made a lot of money. Second of all, he's got some cool contacts, me among them, of course, but David is another one where there's an opportunity for him, right? Ian paid to play. He wrote Gary Vaynerchuk a $20,000 check before COVID. We've done an episode on it. And then ultimately he flew out to California with David, and Gary V told him, learn it first. So Ian's smart. He's hardworking. He put a quarter into it, 1/4 of a year, 3 months. And then when he realizes this is no longer for me to do, but I put enough time in it where I know what works and what doesn't. And then what he did is he went and leveraged his learning, his skill, his time frame. And he took what takes most people 6 months to many years. He microwaved the process by writing a check, attacking it with a purpose, and realizing I've gotten to a point where I know enough where now I can manage. That's exactly what happened. He went through the gig economy himself. He was in all aspects of the gig economy. He wrote a check. He's giving checks. Both of those two things are there, but he already knows how to manage. So he leveraged it, and it happened in what feels like a blink of an eye to most people, literally under 100 days. He went from sitting in front of Gary Vee to having a team of people doing these things for him in a medium that he wasn't even familiar with. That's how you flip.
It's a grind. To you say that feels like a blink of an eye. Feels like 10 years of my life, because I'm not real good at TikTok and Instagram. And I had to really get knee deep in making the videos myself. And it was very frustrating at times. But when I got to a place, Frankie, when I knew it was time to go leverage myself and start hiring people, is when I stopped thinking I was learning. When I got to a place where I'm like, okay, I get all of this. I understand how the platform works, how to make a video, which videos work. I'm not learning right now. I'm going to go hire it out. And I think that's a good question to ask yourself. Am I learning anymore, or can someone else do it?
So the point of it is this, that, and you've lived through that sensation before, but that is that fulcrum in the gig economy. Am I learning, getting better, or is it time for me to leverage? And most people just blow right past it. I watched Pulp Fiction a few weeks ago because I was sick. That burning sensations, pride, fucking with you. Well, that's what's fucking with you. You feel like you're too good for it, but you lack the self-confidence. You're not going to be an LO. You're going to be a processor because you keep ignoring that sensation. Where if you leverage the sensation, that's when it becomes exponential.
Yeah. And, number 4, so we have 5 points if you want to get into the gig economy. Once you've done it for a while, figure out how to automate it. And I want to talk about something Frank's doing a really good job of that I'm going to now go borrow for our podcast. This podcast, by the way, is a gig. It's not a paying gig yet, but we're long-term on this, knowing it's going to pay years down the road if we do it right. So I talked about how my management program, I turned it into a video program. So it wasn't me teaching all the time. Now it's 1 hour a week for 12 weeks for me. And some groups pay me $60,000 for that, for an hour a week, when I have a big enough group, right? If I have 12 people in a group on a Teams call, that's what it costs. So Frankie went from pretty much no Instagram presence at all to just the other day, I just flipped on it. I'm like, holy shit, he's got a nice little presence there. It looks nicer than our podcast videos. It looks nicer than our Instagram site for Let Me Speak to a Manager. And I'm putting all this time in and not doing it real well. So I'm like, dude, give me the people that are working for you. His Instagram looks awesome. There's a post almost every day coming out. And I asked him, like, who's doing all that? And his answer was great. He's outsourcing it. It's automated. I told you send 2 great things. I told you, send me an email with these details of what you want. I won't even touch it. My assistant will send that on to the people who need to do it. We'll probably do a 30-minute call where I'm there just to make sure there's continuity and make sure that I'm doing what I need to do, and we move on. So we're over time, so I'll go quick. My wife and I went away for 3 days to New York. My parents flew up. It was awesome. I got 2 kids, a 3-year-old and an 11-month-old. Like, you need to get away when you have kids of that age. It was wonderful. We're at the 9/11 museum. We're leaving. We're heading to the next thing we're going to do. And literally, Ian, someone walked up to me and goes, "You're an influencer." And I just looked the other way. I thought they were talking to somebody else. And she's like, "No, you're an influencer. You're on Instagram. I follow you." I'm like, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you." And I introduced myself, and she said, "The content's incredible. Please keep doing it." I said, "Okay." And she walked away, and my wife goes, "Oh, I've silenced all your notifications. You too much shit out there." Which is just awesome. But the point is, I don't even know I have an Instagram account, because I use someone who's better at it than me. And we had a conversation a year ago. I write him a check. He does the work, but people like Ian and this person on the street are both saying, "Hey, it's really effective." So that's pretty cool. Frank doesn't want to admit this live, so I'm going to add the rest of the story he didn't tell. She also asked for an autograph from her handsome co-host of his podcast, and Frank got upset and walked away.
Never heard of you.
So number 5, I think you can take part in the gig economy and still build a gig team. So Frank and I use a kid out of Bosnia that does all of our video editing, and he's great. We love him. He does a great job. When he gets busy, he subcontracts out videos to another guy who does gigs. So we pay him $100 to do our little videos for this podcast. And if he's too busy to do it, He's got a guy that'll do it for 50 and he keeps 50. He keeps us as the customer. He bills us. You can always be building out your team so you're not doing all of the grunt work, hourly labor. And I think all that's Frank's approach with social media. This podcast is a gig, but we use a company, Podetize, that does all of our production. We use a video editing group. We use, we're going to use Frank's group to do our social media marketing. It doesn't always have to be you and your hours. And I think it's the same with Frank's real estate business with all the subcontractors. It's, you look for people that can save you time. If you're doing something that doesn't 100% need your expertise, try to find ways to bring other gig workers in to do some of that work, and you keep control of the customer. You keep control of the customer relationship, you invoice, but find people. And the con is you give away a little margin, you lose control, but the upside is there's a lot more growth and you can focus your time on building a team and growing sales.
So as we get into a wrap up, I'll say a few things. First of all, make sure Milos doesn't outsource this one, or his subcontractor is going to ask for a raise. That's number one.
Yes.
Number two, note to self. Number two, I think what's really prudent in all of this is to understand where you are in the cycle. If you are thinking about, do I like this? Do I want to do it? Is this the highest and best use of my time? When you find yourself in your genius zone, which is that point where you're great at something and you love it, and you're doing that as much as humanly possible, you make the most money. Like Ian and I have both worked for a brilliant CEO, brilliant. He does exactly what he's good at and hires everything else out. And I mean, he's probably a billionaire who just doesn't talk to Forbes. He's a very, very, very successful businessman who does this. But you can do this if you're a startup, and you can do it all the way up the chain to CEO of a publicly traded Fortune 50 company. But it comes down to you having the discipline. So if it doesn't serve you, the internet has made it so easy to find someone who can help you do it. And it's really, really, really hard when you start to not want to do it yourself. I meet so many people that tell me they're control freaks. Well, I'll show you who's a control freak and broke. People who aren't broke are people who are not control freaks. You need to have a high level and a high standard that you measure people up to. You need to know how to give direction, follow up, and stay on people. And you have to be okay with saying goodbye to people who don't perform. But if you do that through employees, through 1099s, through the subculture that we're talking about with the gig economy, what it gives you a chance to do is continue to whittle away at the things you're doing and stand on a pedestal. And it allows you, your company, your things to be the absolute best. And I think like the gravy or the icing on the whipped cream on top is when you do both. You use the subcontract base to help you, but then you perform as a subcontractor as well in something that gives you upward mobility.
I would just say, take some time to write down what you're expert at. Just what are you expert at? Everyone's expert at something. Yeah, everyone knows more than the average Joe when it comes to something. And there's a lot of guys like Frank and I that are not the most technically savvy that you could be teaching things to. Like I just said, I've got kids that are, I'm hiring out kids to make us TikTok videos because I'm clearly not going to be the greatest at that, but it's an unbelievable avenue for us and what we're trying to sell and the kind of growth we're trying to. So they're expert at it. You can go out and search. Don't be afraid to lean on a big brand to get started. You don't have to start all on your own as a freelancer, as a gig person. Just like you could start as a driver with Uber, you can start like I started with Quora on Medium writing, worked my way up to Forbes, then my own thing. You can start on Upwork and Fiverr. Just go peruse different jobs out there, type in search terms that you're good at and go see what kind of jobs are out there. Go take a few gigs where you go do something for somebody so that they find value in you, and then they can give you a referral, and maybe you can do a little bit more for them. There are lots of people out there. Our jingle for this podcast, Frank did it all himself. He went out and found a voice actor because we didn't want it to be our voice. And then he had someone put the music to it and add in some clips. Like he put some time in, but we outsourced all of it. We didn't do that ourselves. We don't know how to make a jingle. We didn't know how to make a logo. We found a guy on Upwork who used to work at at amusement parks and draw the little caricatures of people. We found him on Upwork and he charged us like $100. It was really cheap and it's a fun logo and we liked it. And that was enough for us to get going.
So what I'll say to you is this, like we did an entire episode of what would I tell myself like 10 or 12 years ago, and Ian asked me a bunch of questions. What I would tell myself now, if I could go backwards, or what I would tell you, dear listener, if you're curious, if you have a group of smart and influential friends or people who are successful, poll them. What is the one thing I do that if I was going to ask you to write me a $5,000 check for it, you would, and you'd think you're getting a huge value? I had a conversation with someone the other day who has a training course. I think it's brilliant. I'm going to actually do this with several people. I'm going to say, if you were going to call me and you're going to pay, I made you pay me $5,000, what would you want me to talk to you about? I know 6 or 8 people I'm going to survey. Ian's one of them. And if I think I can do, if I get enough of the right answers and I get enough people that tell me it's this thing, and I feel like I can do that with relative ease, I'm going to build it. Because if I have 5 or 6 people who tell me that, that's something that I get to leverage my time on. Not too dissimilar from how Ian did. I've already built other programs that make a shitload of money as a consultant. It's just another idea for a product. But how do you use that concept in your life? How do you take the people that you know around you? How do you survey them? This is where the gig economy goes from working for you to, it's push versus pull. To me, this is push. The pull stuff, the harder shit to deal with is, driving an Uber, delivering food, working for GoPuff. But you can utilize both things and you can really build some momentum.
Fantastic takeaway. I'm outstanding at podcasting, so I'm probably not going to outsource this. At some point, though, I could see us maybe just finding some people that are a little better at generating actual followers and subscribers to a podcast. So maybe at some point we just outsource ourselves. We keep the brand and the equity ownership. We put on Upwork, like looking for 2 podcast hosts that people want to listen to. Maybe we could finish with that.
My takeaway is, man, you really got lucky with Quora. We've been at this well over a year. You don't have nearly the views.
I didn't have someone jacking up all my good content. I blame it all on you. Clearly, you're the link. You're the problem.
Definitely your co-host. With that, I'm leaving.
See you.